Hi, my name's Deborah Lesher. I'm a speech language pathologist with Columbia Regional Program, and I help with AAC consultation. And I wanted to make a video to share some basic programming tips for the communication app GoTalk Now that can be used on an iPad. We often will recommend GoTalkNow as a starting communication tool for some of our more emergent communicators, especially young ones, because it has some advantages. For example, you can use a lot of different formats within GoTalkNow. You can set up pages to be in a grid format, so there's cells ranging from one cell on a page to 36 cells on a page. You can also make visual scenes with the GoTalk Now app. So you can pull in a picture of something familiar to the child, a playground, their bedroom, and you can program in hotspots that speak messages when they touch that button. So, for example, they could touch their bookcase in the picture of their room, and the message could say, I want to read a book. You can also use the GoTalkNow app for a variety of purposes, leisure and communicative. You can make communication books. You can also program in the pages of a book, like The Hungry Caterpillar, something like that. Take pictures and pull in those pages and then put the audio in so you can have your child read it as a book. You can use it like a sequence talking switch. So, for example, you could program in some back and forth messages that they might have on the phone with somebody. Um, some of the downsides, though, of the Go Talk Now app is it's not a great uh, tool to provide a lot of robust vocabulary for continued language development. We want children to be able to say anything they want anytime they want. So at some point, they're going to need a lot of vocabulary words, access to a keyboard and alphabet, access to quick phrases. So at that point, we might want to start looking at another tool. It does have a limited number of images that come with the app. The image library is small. You can import things from the internet or from your photos, but without doing some in-app purchases, there is not a lot of symbols to be able to pull from. And the app can be kind of time consuming to program, especially if you are programming in a lot of vocabulary, more than 50, 100 words. You might want to be thinking about a different app at that point. But when we are starting with it, we do want to be careful with the words we put in. Of course, we want to put really important and reinforcing items and activities and people into it. But we want to also use some powerful words that we call core vocabulary words that can be used across a variety of contexts with a variety of partners. So, not just words that would be used at book reading time or at meal time, but words you could use across all those different times. Words like more and go and stop, turn, those kind of words. We want to make sure, if we can, that kids have access to those words. So again, not always, but one of the tools we often consider for emergent communicators is this GoTalk Now app. It can be an excellent introduction to dynamic screens if children haven't worked on an iPad or aren't familiar with how a dynamic screen works, or for children who are very new to AAC, or children who have been using light tech communication boards or communication books and are getting the idea of that, and we want to transition them into the idea of using a dynamic screen in the beginning. The GoTalk app Now app might be good for that. We can also give access to some really highly motivating items for children, like videos that you can import. You can see on this slide, we have some students where we've really customized for them some of the favorite videos to give them some more practice accessing um, their communication tool. We like a lot of things about GoTalk Now for adaptability. It is often a nice tool to start with for some of our students who are blind or visually impaired, because you can change the cell size. You can make them really big. You can make whatever cell size you might need. You can change backgrounds. You can put big frames around the cells and different colors. You can outline it all in red so it's very visible. You can use switches with the GoTalk Now app. So for our students who may be switch users and aren't going to directly select with a finger, it's a nice app to get going with that. You can also set up auditory cues so they can hear what's coming before they make a selection. So it's got a lot of nice features in that area. Another reason why we might recommend it for some of our students in our orthopedic impairment programs and other Columbia Regional programs. So overall, even though maybe not a long-term robust app for students who are really going to work on building language, it can be a great place to start for some emergent communicators. Emergent communicators is a term that was first used by Dr. Pat Dowden at the University of Washington, and she described 3 different levels of communicators as far as AAC goes. And you can see in this excerpt from the Bridge School, what we're really talking about are students who don't really have a reliable, consistent form of symbolic communication, so words, spoken words, symbols, to use expressively for language. We're going to see kind of more unconventional behaviors and maybe some conventional behaviors like facial expressions, gestures, some vocalizations that might be not as intelligible for some people and maybe recognizable to communication partners as some of the other behaviors might be, but not beyond maybe 1 or 2 primary people in the student's life. It traditionally, emergent communicators are kind of talking about what's happening right now, right in front of them, and not what's in another room or what happened in the past. So our goal with working with these students is kind of to focus on giving them a little bit more of a reliable communication method, a behavior using some symbolic communication, moving toward that, and giving them opportunities to have interactions with people beyond those caregivers who really understand them or are able to guess at their intent. I also think about emergent communicators when I'm doing an administration of the communication matrix. The first 4 levels of kind of communication behavior that you see in the communication matrix, in my mind, kind of fit within that emergent communicator. Some of that pre-intentional or unconventional behaviors that we're seeing, and even some conventional behaviors that people might recognize, but not using any symbolic communication. Those are the sort of the behaviors we see with emergent communicators. So just generally, the GoTalk Now app can be a great tool for these emergent communicators. It can be great for symbols and communication partners to use as a tool to model how to use symbolic communication with their children. Um, the best way to teach people how to use a different communication system is to use the same system they're using. So if they're using speech, we're all using speech, we're giving them speech, they're going to use speech. But if they're going to use an AAC tool, something like sign language or an app or a communication device or communication board, we need to be using that same tool that we want them to use so they can learn it. And it's through repetition and using with motivating activities and routines over and over and over again that children start to use symbolic communication with these tools. So it takes a while, it's a process, but just know that when you're modeling, when you're using the same tool, looking for opportunities to use that tool, you are teaching your child or your student how the tool is used. And that is the best way that AAC systems are taught. So again, another advantage to GoTalk Now app is families and therapists can kind of quickly make changes based on what's motivating to students. That's so key, is to make sure it's motivating and not kind of dry, boring stuff that children don't want to talk about. We want to be going with what they think is exciting. So it's nice to be able to make some changes on the fly to adapt to new favorite shows or foods or whatever we find out that the child is really into. So with that, I'm going to move over to my iPad and show you how you can make some basic changes on the GoTalk app up and ready to go. Just wanted to show you how you can do some basic programming here, or if you need to make some changes. So if you're, and I'm going to be looking over toward my iPad, my apologies, but if you're wanting to make a change, for example, if you're going
I
into
want
I want, and you want to add
something to eat.
a new kind of food, then this might be the page that you want to add it to. So just kind of keep in mind, which page do I want to make my changes or additions to. The way to get into editing on the GoTalk Now app is a three-fingered swipe from the top, or what I often do, because my fingers don't get recognized very well by the iPad, is I hold down the home button and count to 10 slowly. So the button that looks like a house, you can see I'm holding it down, and I wait about 10 seconds, and then it's opening up my editor. So this is where I can go in and use the page editor to make some changes. So I'm going to touch page editor here, and you can see the format's a little different. Just to show you a little bit, we kind of want to keep our formats the same. If we have a student on a 9-grid system, we don't want to change that up too much. But if you go to this button down at the bottom by the home, with the 3 bars, then you'll see there that that's where you can change the background color of the page. You can change how many buttons are on a page. So that's just a good resource to know if you're starting anew. Um, and not everybody's page is going to look exactly like this. Some people might have a system set up like this. Some people might have just core vocabulary words. But in general, if you want to find the page that you want to change, you can touch this stack of papers here, and you'll see all your pages. So I know I want to go in and change my page that relates to food, and it's called Eat. And then I can see my page editor page. So I can add a button by tapping to add button in any of these spots. So I'll tap this one. Oops, I didn't tap it fast enough, just tap it. There we go. And here we have kind of a blank slate to start with. So we can add some button text here. So let's say we're going to add the word spaghetti. Well, no, I think we had spaghetti. Let's say we're going to add the word popsicle. That's the new favorite thing. So you can either touch and drag right on this button text and pull it on up, and double click on it and change it to whatever you want it to say. So right here I could touch, or I could put in popsicle. You can also go down here on the bottom and touch button text. You see how that popped up? And this is where you could even go in and adjust the size more, the font, the color of the text. So if you touch at the very top there where it says button text, you can also enter what you want it to say. So I'm typing in popsicle, and then I'm going to hit done, and there's popsicle. You can drag that word around anywhere you want. You can use the pinch feature and make it bigger, oops, bigger or smaller. You can turn it all around if you like. Um, Sometimes you don't see all the letters in your words, so then I might go in and just make it a little smaller by pinching it. So there we have our words. So next we have to add an image to go with it. So that's where we go down to add image. And people's libraries might look different. You might not have all of these. You might have, if you have bought symbol sticks or a different library, you might have some of those in here as well. It just depends what you own. So I would either go into my GoTalk image library, or I could use a photo, take a photo, um, or go on the internet and do a search. So I'm going to go to my GoTalk image library, and I could look in categories, but I'm going to instead type the word popsicle. And it doesn't look like it has that word, like I said, about the sometimes limited library. Let's see if I do ice cream, if I can get anything similar. Well, those aren't too bad. Okay, so I couldn't find it there, but if I did find something, I would just touch that particular item I'd like and it would pop it in, and then we could do some adjustments there. So instead, I'm going to go back to add image and I'm going to do an internet search, and I am on Wi-Fi and on the internet. So I'm going to look for popsicle and find an image I like. Some of these are very busy and I would not want to use these photos, especially if my student had any kind of visual impairments, because they might be confusing. If you can see the rainbow photo down there, it's got a lot of complexity in the background. So I ideally look for something that might just have a white background. I like this one. And you can see it came in kind of giant. So I'm going to pinch and make that a little smaller. There we go. And I didn't mention it, but I like to keep the text on the top, because that way when a child is touching the picture or the button, they can still see the text. And I want children to always have access to literacy, even if they're not readers yet. It's so great to see that word. So I don't want them to cover the word with their finger when they're touching. Okay, so we have our image, we have our text. Usually the default is that it's going to use the synthetic voice to say the word. So you may have a male voice or a female voice. Um, but you can go into action at the top on the left here, and that'll pop up, and it's telling me right now it's set to text to speech. So that means it's going to say what I've typed in. I can preview to hear how that sounds.
Popsicle.
That sounds great. What if your child doesn't call them popsicles? They call it lolly or something, and you want to have it say something different? Then you can type in that grid the different word if you want something besides what the text says. If you wanted to record your own word, which will start taking up a lot of memory if you do it for everything, but there's some words we do want to record, then you can go to the recorded audio and it'll take you through recording it. So you just hit start recording. Popsicle. And you can check that. Popsicle. And if you want to use that, you can use the recorded. And you can keep recording it over and over again if you don't like the way it sounds. So with this basic programming, that's all we're talking about is, and I'm going to switch it back to text to speech, but we're talking about putting in the text, the image, and making sure it's speaking. So once we've done that, we can touch the home button, and that will take us back to our main page. Player is what our students are using usually. So if we go to player, we can test it.
I want.
I'm going to go to I want, eat,
Something to eat.
and there you can see my popsicle.
Popsicle.
So that is the way to program in a new button. If you wanted to delete a button, we would touch that home button for a little while or swipe down with 3 fingers. We would go to page editor, find the page we wanted to edit. And then let's say we want to delete spaghetti. If I touch and hold it, then you see we have some options here. I can delete, and then that'll go away. I'm going to say cancel because my child's not into spaghetti right now, but they might like it later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually hide this. I'm going to disable it. And so I touched it and held it for a little bit, and I'm going to say disable. And that way it's still there, but our student's not going to see it. Sometimes people like to introduce words by hiding some of the images on the page, the symbols on the page, and focusing on one for a little bit and then reintroducing them. That can be a nice way to help them really get to the right place at first, but we want to make sure we're always giving kids as much access to vocabulary as we can. So we want to bring back our words as quickly as possible. So now that we did that hiding, we can go back to our home, our player,
I want.
navigate to
Something
eat,
to eat.
and you can see that spaghetti is not there anymore. So those are just some basic tips for programming the GoTalk. Again, you can put in videos and do a lot of other things, but that's a little more complex, so would probably be in a different video. Um, I just encourage you to play around and see what you can do, but once you've programmed 2 or 3 buttons, it can be pretty easy. All right. Also, feel free to contact us via email at Columbia Regional Program if you have more questions or you want to go through this in more depth or do a Zoom meeting. We are happy to do that. All right. Thanks so much.